Okay. Okay, we're going to call the January 11th, 2022 Village of Gates Mills Council meeting to order. Beth?
Eton,
Here.
Allworder,
Here.
Deacon,
Here.
Press, Steinbrink,
Here.
Turner, Welsh.
And the first thing on the agenda is the oath of office. So could our new council people stand where you are? And when I ask you, you'll raise your right hand and each one of you will say your own name. Is that okay? You'll be able to hear me. Okay, so I, say your names, please.
David Atten.
Craig Steinbrink.
Do hereby swear
Do hereby swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
that I will
I will
support
support the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
Constitution of the
Constitution
State
of
of
the
Ohio,
State of Ohio,
and the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills,
and the
and the
Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills,
and that I will honestly, faithfully, and impartially
and I will
and I will
honestly, faithfully, and impartially
discharge my duties as a council member
discharge my duties as a council member
to which I have been elected
to which I have been elected
according to law and to the best of my ability.
according to
law
law and the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you could each come over here and sign, fill this in and sign your name to it, it'd be terrific.
Okay.
I've got pens here. And this, David, you could do this one.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have the Office of Treasurer, Steve. You can come over here to do this one, I think.
I, Steve Zaborski,
Do hereby swear
do hereby swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of
I
America,
will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills,
and the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills,
and that I will honestly, faithfully, and impartially
and will honestly, faithfully, and impartially
discharge my duties as treasurer,
discharge my duties as treasurer,
to which I have been elected
to which I have been elected,
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Congratulations. And if you could- Thank you. Okay. Next is the election of Council Pro Tem for a one-year term.
I move to appoint Sandra Turner to the position of Council President Pro Tem.
Second.
Beth?
I'm writing too. Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Welsh.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is, oh, wait, we have to do the oath. I'm sorry. Without Janet. Beth not here. A lot of post-its here. Okay. I, Sandra Turner, do hereby swear I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills, and the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills, and that I will honestly, faithfully, and impartially discharge my duties as President Pro Tem, to which I've been elected, according to law and the best of my ability. According to law and the best of my ability. Congratulations. And if that's it. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to the mayor's appointments for the administrative.
All right, well, we have to read them into the minutes first, Ed, so hold that thought for 1 minute, okay?
Okay.
All right, next is the mayoral appointments to administrative offices. Robert S. Reitman, Income Tax Administrator, R. Todd Hunt, Walter Haverfield, Law Director, Mike Cicero, Prosecutor, David Biggert, Service Director, Building Official, and Building Inspector, Trevor Maffello, Service Manager, Janet Moe, Finance Administrator and Tax Administrator, Assistant Tax Administrator, D. Greg Minicello, Chief of Police, P. Thomas Robinson, Fire Chief.
I'd like to move that we accept the mayor's appointments for the administrative offices.
Second.
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
yes,
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is mayoral appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Architectural Board of Review, term ending 12/31/24, Sandra Turner and Jan Holtzman. Historical Review Committee, term ending 12/31/22, Sarah Welsh, Mary Holmes, Lori Deacon, Ann Steele, architects Dave Ellison, Joseph Giglio, and alternate architect William Childs. Local Board of Tax Review, term ending 12/31/23, Dave Burchick, Dave Burke, and John K. Lane. Gates Mills Land Conservancy for term ending 12/31/25, Scott Broom, and for the unexpired term of Joe Joseph ending 12/31/22, Jamie Caricher, and I believe he's here. Could you stand? We thank you for your service.
Welcome.
Welcome. Volunteer Firefighters Dependents Fund Board, Ed Welsh, David Atton.
I'd like to move to accept the mayor's appointments for the individual councils. I'm sorry, boards, commissions, and committees.
Second.
Who was the second? Sandra. Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
yes,
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is minutes from the council meeting of December 14th that were in your packet.
Move to accept.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Three of us weren't here.
Pardon me?
Three of us weren't members of council at the time.
Well, you can still ask questions if you have some.
Okay, no.
Okay,
So the three new members will abstain.
correct.
Okay.
Eton,
Abstain.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
abstain,
Press,
Abstain.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is pay ordinance 1257 for $1,124,585.14.
Move to accept.
Second.
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
yes,
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is financial statement. Steve?
Good evening. This month's report focuses on the full year financial results for the 12 months ended December 31st of 2021. Financial statements were distributed to the mayor, to the clerk and council in advance of the council meeting. The village continues to be on very solid financial footings. For 21, the village generated a $2.2 million surplus, has cash on hand of $8.3 million, and has no debt. For the 12 months, the general fund revenue of $7.6 million exceeded the general fund expenses of $5.4 million by $2.2 million, resulting in the large surplus. Revenue from municipal income taxes was favorable to the prior year by $2 million and favorable to budget by $789,000. The tax revenue increase was the result of some large receipts that are not expected to recur in 2022. Real estate tax revenue and other source revenue were slightly ahead of budget. Expenses for the year were $5.4 million, $600,000 higher than 21, but $500,000 below 21's budget. The largest variances were A, increases in 21 for transfers to other funds, primarily the capital improvement fund for the 21 road program, and B, a $200,000 budget expenditure for a new truck that was not spent in 21. It will be spent in 22, as the truck manufacturer could not complete its manufacturing in 21 and we could not take delivery. Personnel costs of $2.5 million for all four departments, police, fire, service, administration, were below budget of $2.6 million, representing good control by those department heads of their workforce. The general fund cash balance of $7.4 million represents over 12 months of our operating needs. With the 21 year being complete, it's good to confirm, as we have been reporting the last 6 months, that the village completed calendar 21 with an operating surplus well in excess of our planned surplus of $777,000 for the general fund. As the books of the village are maintained essentially on a cash basis, there can be large variances based on when cash is received and when expenses are paid. Month over month and year over year, it is not uncommon to have a surplus one period and a shortfall the next period. While the general fund is used for the vast majority of the village's transactions, the village is required to maintain separate other special funds, either by restriction, special purpose, legislation, etc. The village started 21 with $775,000 in special funds, received $2,045,000, dispersed $1,921,000, and ended 21 with $899,000 in these funds. The largest disbursements were $947,000 from the Capital Improvement Fund, $231,000 from the Land Conservation Fund, $219,000 for the Wastewater Treatment Fund, and $162,000 from the Street Construction Maintenance and Repair Fund. Later in this council meeting, Ordinance 22-2 will be introduced to appropriate for 22 $1,318,000 for several of these special purpose funds so that the village is enabled to use these funds for the purposes in which they are restricted. Budget for 22. As reported in the December 21 council meeting, the Budget and Finance Committee approved a balanced budget for 22 consisting of $5.6 million in revenue and $5.7 million in expenses. The expenditure figure of $5,731,000 was approved in December in the appropriation ordinance 2021-50. Priorities for the first quarter of 22 include the following. We'll use now the full year 21 figures to inform us on the longer range implications and revisit the financial projections that were developed in 2020 for the long range plan and update the long range numbers. We'll look at the special purpose funds, evaluating the manner in which they are available to the fund, to the village for restricted purposes. And finally, we'll be evaluating the federal COVID ARTA funds for qualified uses now that the final rules were issued last week. This report will be posted on the village's website. To add some color to that, we've been reporting for a number of months that we are in good financial position, and I think these numbers confirm that. I'm happy to take any questions now or later through after a meeting, through an email, drop me a line, catch me at the post office. We'll make sure that people understand what the numbers are and the kind of position that we're in. we were fortunate in 21. We had some very unexpected revenues. Actually, we expected them, but we got more than we even expected in our budget. And that was good and that was smart. We were able in many cases to save those funds and have those funds invested in Ancora. And that will benefit the village for a number of years going forward. At the same time, we're not kidding ourselves that some of the expenses, such as the truck, would have been incurred if the manufacturer could have made delivery, and we would have spent some of those monies. But we are in a good position, and we have a good budget going into next year. I think a couple other things, the long-range plan numbers, which gave a lot of conversation the last 6 months, we'll update those now that we have a full 21 numbers and we're not guessing what 21 might be. We now know what it is, and we'll see what those implications are and update the numbers and the approach, the assumptions in the long-range plan, report that back out to council and others in the first quarter. Secondly, there was some conversation about some of the special purpose funds, especially with new people on council or new positions. What are the purposes of the funds? What can they be used for? Where's the revenue from? We'll make sure all those questions are answered and people are comfortable with it. In many cases, they are restrictions either from the donor, from legislation, from taxes, from the federal government, local governments, and those need to be accounted for in special funds. That is what government accounting and fund accounting is all about. And then finally, we just did receive literally 2 days ago, the 444 pages of the final rules of the ARTA legislation. This gives us now clearer guidance, as these are no longer interim rules, on what the federal relief monies are that we have received and will receive. This is, for those of you that were familiar with COVID, you've heard of the CARES Act. This would be kind of the municipal version of the CARES Act. It's called the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. The 44 pages is the summary. It's available on the website. And if you want to put yourself to sleep, there's 444 pages of the actual final rules. The mayor's asked me to, over the next several weeks, to work with the department heads as well as with council to identify potential uses of those funds. They can range from everything to stormwater, to police and fire, to pay for individuals, help disadvantaged businesses, help disadvantaged residents. There's a broad spectrum on what those monies can be used for. So if you have specific ideas or interests, want to get involved, give me a ring. And likewise, I invite anybody on council, the clerk or the mayor to weigh in, and department heads that will be reaching out to you for your ideas. Half of that money has been received by the village, is in our deposit. The other half, the government confirmed the other day, should be here in the summer. They say May. So that would be a nice occurrence. That's my report. And again, happy to take questions now or later.
Thank you, Steve. Any
welcome.
questions or anything? Okay, we'll keep going. Mayor's report is next, and I have two things. The State of the Village will look to get that out in the first part of February, like we've done previously. Also, Mayfield Schools is having a coffee on Tuesday, the 18th, from 5:30 to 6:30 here in the community house. And it's very casual. It's to meet and greet with the community that they represent. Anything you want to add to that, Sandra?
No, it's just oh, thank you. Thank you. This is just a short informal meeting. We were really not aware of it early on, or we might have done a lot more promotion of it, but we'll be reaching out to the superintendent to make his annual report to the
They've
council.
publicized it within their school system.
Right, right.
Thank you. Clerk's report,
Nothing to report.
committee report. Sandra?
Well, let me just start out by taking this off. And I always do this. I say I'm not going to put it on. It doesn't look very professional, but anyway, I'd like to thank the mayor and Todd and the department heads for contributing to the orientation for new council members that we held on December 22nd, and included a tour of the facilities here and some assignments in terms of ethics and sunshine laws and social media that they'll be completing and letting the clerk know. I think that for our committees, I'd like to work on some similar orientation. The committees are different and they all operate under different regulations and requirements. So the orientations might be different, but I think welcoming new people and integrating them and letting them know what's expected of them can really help to help the function of the committee. So we'll be working on that.
Better definitions would just help.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to make a report on the an update on the comprehensive plan. And just to say that, we're progressing and solidifying the membership on the advisory committee and the other teams. Outside perspectives, neighborhood co-captains, PR and communications, and finally, key interviews. So I'm sure that people are very curious about, who all we've talked to, who is serving on which committees. And I want to do that. Chip and I want to make those available as soon as possible. But we are also interested in making sure that the people we reached out to over the last couple of months, once they hear exactly what's expected of them and we get a confirmation that they do want to serve over the course of the next year, we'll look forward to making the roster of those names available. Later this week on Thursday, we're having the first organizing meeting of the Outside Perspectives team, and that'll be facilitated by Chris Hopkins, our CT consultant, Chip and myself, and Lindsay Steinberg and Charles Spear. This will be an opportunity for them to hear the overview of the comprehensive planning process and next steps, and also ask them to volunteer. And their work on this committee will be especially done in the first quarter of the year. So again, I think overall in making these calls, Karen and Chip and I have been very, very pleasantly surprised about the interest and the enthusiasm people have shown in committing to this project.
Thank you. Any other committee reports?
The only thing I guess I would add is we did have a Land Conservancy Board meeting this morning. Jamie was there as a guest. He'll now be a member. Celeste McClung was there, and our other new member, Anthony Fazio. And certainly there was a new energy in that board meeting, and I think we're all enthusiastic about the year to come.
Great. Thank you. David?
Was the chairman re-elected to be chair of the Land Conservancy?
Yes. Rob Galloway continues on as chair. He said for one more term until September. So people need to be thinking about who's going to step up next.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee reports? No? Okay. We'll move on to Police Department, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Everyone should have received a copy of my monthly report. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Have we even had one DOA in a year? Now we had two suddenly?
We usually pick up a couple
I don't-
a year, unfortunately.
Really?
but,
I don't recall that. in
Yeah,
prior-
it's ironic, in the same week. That's a little unusual, but yeah, I can't remember the last time that has happened, but
Wow.
so yeah, that was not the best week. So one thing I thought I would add to my report. So last Thursday on the personnel front, we did have an officer sustain injury while checking a residential house alarm. And the officer will be out for probably about 2 months with a broken wrist. So I just thought I would mention that. But other than that, fairly busy month. And we had a couple spells in the department with COVID. No surprise to anybody, I would imagine. So working our way through it. It's kind of light time of the year for us in terms of people taking vacation, holiday time and whatnot. So we should be able to get through this period in pretty good shape. Any questions? That'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you.
A little bit out of order, but Steve, do you want to just summarize for everybody what the Improvement Society distributed in December for bonuses, roughly, or?
Sure, across the 4 departments and roughly 40 employees, both part-time and full-time. I think most of you know, and I thank all of you in the audience who contributed, which was a lot of people. I think we had close to 350 potential donors this year. Charlie's out, so I don't have the final numbers. But as you know, based on seniority and classification, difficulty of job, if it's the fire department, it's based on number of service calls, number of training sessions, and so on. There's this very exotic formula. But we're fortunate to have received from the villagers and distributed $64,000 to our 40-some employees. It was a great afternoon, that Friday afternoon, and appreciate again everyone's support in the village to do that. We'll likely have in the pink sheet either in February or March a list of all the donors, just to again recognize how well received this is across our village. When essentially half our people are contributing on top of what else they're contributing to, we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Service Department, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, you should have received a brief report for December. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. If none, that concludes my report.
Any questions? Okay. Next is Fire Department, Tom.
Cooking school again, Tom?
That is an ongoing issue. You know, the saying is, no one ever calls the fire department to say I did something smart. But it keeps us busy, keeps us in business. You should have received a copy of last month's runs, including the year-end totals for both fire and EMS. We expected a pretty big increase in the EMS category after COVID last year. The numbers were down significantly, so they've basically come back up to about what we think is our norm. If there are no other questions, that concludes the fire department report. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, when we're starting the ordinances, sorry. The next 2 ordinances relate to the automated speed traffic enforcement program. So I'd like to have council make comments or add-ins first, and then I will ask the audience if they have a comment. So next on the agenda is ordinance 2021-36 as revised 1/11/22. An ordinance enacting Gates Mills Codified Ordinances, Chapter 318, Automated Speed and Traffic Enforcement Program. Greg?
So just to kind of bring things full circle, this has been going on for, to bring things full circle. I believe this started conversations around the traffic cameras at some point late summer at, frankly, the direction of ODOT because of some of the difficulties the village has experienced on Mayfield Road. We gave residents an opportunity at the end of November to attend a town hall. It was well attended. Happy to say there's been pretty extensive coverage in local media and the Chagrin Valley Times about what the village is considering and what council is considering and what actions we're looking at. This is now on 3rd reading. So we feel like this has been well telegraphed enough. The concerns we've heard from both Chief Robinson and from Chief Minicello with some of the issues that we've had. The speed limit has been reduced from 55 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour on that road. The village was fortunate to get a grant to help with the reconstruction of the turning lanes, which we feel will go a long way towards improving the safety. And then there's this piece of it. So I'd make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-36, which is an ordinance enacting Gates Mills codified ordinance, chapter 318, automated speed and traffic enforcement. And I would also move that we declare an emergency so that this becomes effective once signed by the mayor. We can get this program up and running and ensure the safety of the motorists that are driving up and down 18,000 some motorists that are driving up and down Mayfield Road each day.
Okay, so we're voting on the first thing, which is not an emergency because it's had 3 readings. The next one, which is the
resolution, yes, you're right.
Right.
Yep.
So we don't, so the ordinance becomes effective upon approval, you don't,
30
Becomes
days.
effective in 30 days. This is the codified ordinance setting up the program.
correct.
It was felt that the contract to set up the program and set up the facilities for this needed to be an emergency to get it moving now because it's going to take a time period to get it in place.
Correct.
And the chief may be able to tell us what that certain time period is. So the only revision of this ordinance 36 from the last meeting is to change the fine for 10 to 19 miles over from $110 to $100 even. That was the only change here. But this will go into effect if passed this evening, 30 days from this evening.
So it's okay if that's not in effect while the contract is
Correct.
working forward. Okay.
Second.
That's on.
Well,
No, hang on.
do we want discussion at this point or do we?
Do you have a question, Dave? Yes, go
Yes, I
ahead.
do. Looking at page 9, the table that stipulates the fines for each category of speed. I'm concerned that this, if publicly available to people, will tell people that the speed limit's been raised from 40 to 50 miles an hour. And that is not, in my mind, a good idea, given what we're trying to do here, which is to reduce speeds on average. So I'd suggest that we change, rather than 10 to 19 miles an hour, that is 1 to 19 miles an hour. We would have the opportunity to fine people $100. This doesn't take away any of the discretion that the police department has as to who they issue tickets to. And if they don't want to issue tickets to people going less than 10 miles an hour above the speed limit, that's fine. But I think this ordinance should not suggest that we're raising the speed limit to 50 miles an hour, which is the way I read it, and other people have too. So that's a suggestion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mike?
Are we going to warn people in advance what we're doing before we start actually enforcing?
My understanding, and the chief will correct, we're going to have signs that will go into place. Well, first of all, it's going to be 90 days from when we sign the contract, and there will be signs that go in ahead of time. Then there will be a 1-month warning period. So yes, there'll be notification prior to actually getting a citation. Right? David?
One other point. The ordinance contemplates cameras on other roads in the village, beyond Mayfield Village, beyond Mayfield Road. So I'm trying to think about how it might be applied on, let's say, Chagrin River Road, where the speed limit is actually 40 miles an hour, the posted limit. The 10 miles of leniency would take it up to 50. And there are parts of Chagrin River Road that are very bendy. There are streets that come into it. This is north of Mayfield. With poor visibility. There are deer, there are lots of school buses, and there are actually advisory yellow signs for 20, 30, and 35 miles an hour on that stretch of Mayfield, Chagrin River Road. So,
Correct.
I think we need to look at this in the context not just of Mayfield Road, but of how it might be applied elsewhere in the village. So I have even more concern about this 10 miles an hour we were talking about between 1 mile an hour and 10 miles an hour above the limit. They're my concerns.
That's an interesting point.
David, just I'm reading, you make, I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm reading this. It certainly, the ordinance certainly talks a lot about Mayfield Road.
It does.
I understand it could be a general, we could, this just sets the ground rules. If we were to ever put,
On the first page, Chip, it's explicit that it could be used elsewhere.
Todd, I'm going to ask the law director. Todd,
The
Is he correct?
contract only applies to Mayfield Road.
I'm not talking about the contract, I'm talking about the ordinance.
I understand the ordinance would apply to all, but we don't have the apparatus to do it
know
on
we
the
don't.
other streets at this time. So you're correct that if that decision is made to move to other streets besides Mayfield Road, this ordinance will apply.
Exactly.
I see, yeah, it does say that. This issue of 0 to 19 versus 10 to 19, I've talked about it a lot. I've talked to the police chief. And the two things that jump out to me are, well, first of all, the reaction of the public. As I understand it, and the police chief has talked to a number of other communities that have put these cameras in. And the public tends to think that these cameras are like robots. And so if it says that that you could be issued a ticket from 1 to 19 miles an hour, they make the assumption that therefore they're going to be noticed, they're going to receive a notice of violation at going 1 mile over the speed limit. And in fact, Mayfield Village, which has only been, only a few months ahead of us, did put in 0 to 19 in their code or ordinance, and the police chief was deluged with concerns by residents saying, "You mean you're going to find me going 1 mile over the speed limit?" And while he corrected that, they were left with the impression. I think we're all concerned that we are doing this for safety purposes, and if we, if the press picks up and says, "Gee, Gates Mills is going to issue notice of violation for going 1 mile over," it's going to look like a real revenue grab, et cetera. So this is only a restriction for the cameras. This dictates how the program gets set up with GATSO. And if we feel that we want to give tickets under that, the police can go out and do their own radar at any point in time. And I understand that Greg does intend for the police to be out there, perhaps as much as they ever have been. But the other thing is that, and I'll get into this in a further comment, but the notice of violation process, the camera will operate under the ground rules that are set up. So if it's set up at 1 to 19 or 0 to 19, well, anything over 0 miles an hour, so 46 or above, or if it's set at 55 and above, which is what this ordinance would set, then it will take a picture and GATSO will process that and then send those violations to our police department to review. So if we set this at 0 or 1 per the ordinance, then that's going to be one heck of a lot of violations that the police department's going to have to go through and just simply put aside if they don't intend to give notices. So there is a workload implication potentially. Maybe that detail could be worked out, but I'm kind of torn. I happen to agree with you, David, that I don't certainly want to put signs out there saying, "Hey, you're free to speed up to 9 miles over." But I think for public perception, I'm in favor of the 10 to 19. So.
What if we compromise, David? I had not thought of the point.
Can I make a comment first?
Okay.
The public's perception will be based on what we do, not what we say. And if we don't give tickets under 10 miles an hour above the limit, that'll be our practice. And people will say, "Oh, they're not giving tickets." They can figure that out for themselves, and they will. Not good, but they will. So I still believe that the right answer is from 1 to 19, we should have the $100 fine. I mean, I'm convinced of that. And we've got to think about the other roads as well, which we need to apply this thinking to for the future.
Right. And I had not thought about it as applying it to other roads. So, you know, I
Nor had
could.
until I read the resolution,
We could also go back at any time and change this in the future if we were to get more cameras, which we're certainly not thinking of. Or we could compromise at this point in time and say 5 miles an hour to 19.
we could. Doesn't help my concern.
Any other thoughts?
No, I would just add, I know we've gone back and forth over this a few times. I think the original ordinance was up to 19 miles an hour and it was changed. And I think if our overarching goal here is to reduce the average speed on Mayfield Road, everyone's given 10 miles an hour over. I mean, I drive down that hill frequently, and I will challenge the best of us here to drive down that hill and do 45 miles an hour, not ride the brake the whole way down. So David, I hear what you say, but I have real concerns, perception versus reality, and no one will really know who's getting tickets for what unless they're out broadcasting it and advertising it. And I know what happened in Mayfield Village. Chip talked about this. The press didn't cover the cameras. It was the fact that you can drive down 271 at 2 miles an hour the speed limit, and you're probably going to get a ticket. And I think
where does probably come from? Where does the word probably?
Well, that's perception. That's out of our control. But when we've looked at this, the overarching goal is, and we're, again, as I said before, I could argue either side of this, but what we're really trying to do here is lower the average speed on Mayfield Road. And I think hey, we're giving people, you've got the first 10 miles an hour, 11 over, who knows where the machine gets set. But what the public will know for sure, and what village residents will know for sure, is that if you're doing 46 miles an hour down the hill, you're not going to get a citation in the mail for it.
And the chief and I did speak with the chief in Mayfield Village about this, and his one regret is having set it from 0 to 19, because what the press picked up was out of the contracts and the legislation. They didn't talk to anybody. And the calls to Mayfield Village were people saying, you're going to give me a ticket 1 mile over the speed limit. So if he had to do everything over again, he would set it at 10 to 19. And being transparent that to the public, we're trying to slow everything down. This isn't.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think it should be from 1 to 19. You're exactly right.
Yeah, I think, David, the problem is if you set it lower and you don't enforce it, then you have the same issue. It doesn't really solve your problem,
People
right?
will be careful. He might give a couple of people tickets at 48, 58, 55 miles, 54 miles an hour, I'm sorry, just to keep them honest. 90% of the traffic that goes along Mayfield Road exceeds the speed limit. That's simple. On that data we had from November of 2018, I think it was. 90% exceeds the speed limit. And it's too fast. That's just my point of view. I'm for the ordinance, don't get me wrong. I just want it to be really emphasizing safety.
Got it.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Any other input or thoughts on this?
I'm just wondering if we looked into, or if it's possible to have like a 5 mile an hour where you would have the discretion. The police department would have the discretion if they saw the same plate, in that range.
We
to
could
issue
put
a
it 5 to
warning, or-
19 if
Well,
we wanted
Do
to.
the same thing with 1 to 19.
I think the 5 to 19 though is kind of moving in your direction a little bit. It's
Yeah,
a nice
so-
compromise.
It's fine. That's okay. That's okay. I would prefer it the other way, but this resolution is too important to mess around with. This ordinance is.
Say it one more time,
This
David.
ordinance is too important.
You need to speak in that
I'm
because
sorry,
they need to pick it up on the
sorry.
video.
This ordinance is too important to mess around with tonight. I'm all for it.
Okay, so we'll go forward as is.
No, I prefer the 5 mile an hour compromise, if that's possible.
If I can just jump. if I could just add something here. I mean, nobody's wrong here. I think it's subjective. And I think Councilman Steinbring pointed out initially did have 1 to 19, and then doing some research on some others and talking to GATSO, and everybody's seen that their recommendation to us would be 10 to 19. And so I thought about it. It's not going to, it wouldn't change anything. I would say I would not be in favor of 5 to 9. That's not going to change anything. To me, that honestly would be pointless in my opinion. You're either going to have to do 1 to 19 or 10 to 20. And I guess the way I looked at it in the end was this. I mean, we're going to do exactly what we're saying we're going to do. If you're driving between 10 and 19, you can receive a ticket. And so that's the way I looked at it. That's full transparency. We're not getting into 0 to 19. We're saying is nobody's going to receive a citation for driving up to 9 miles and over the speed limit, period. So 10 and 19 is full transparency. It's crystal clear. You can receive a citation if you're driving between 10 and 19. That's how I looked at it in the end.
So I can drive through the school zone at 29 miles an hour and not get a ticket?
Well, that's school zone. You can read now. Let me also say this. This is by an automated traffic camera. Nothing says you cannot receive a citation for driving 5 to 8 or 9 miles over by a mobile patrol officer. We're saying this on an automated basis. That's different.
But the whole idea of these cameras is to reduce the amount of time your men have to spend on Mayfield Road
Correct.
for safety purposes. All right, well, let's not spend any more time on this.
Might I make a suggestion that since we're on third reading in this format, that we leave it as is, and we can certainly wait to get some of the data back once the system is up and running, and have another test run by ODOT to see what the speeds are. And if the average speeds aren't coming down like we've expected them, then we've got something else that we can do to maybe make the enforcement a little more specific.
That makes sense too.
And along that line, Greg, will we not be getting data on speeds from the camera? We don't need ODOT.
Yeah, so they'll have speeds. That's right.
So I don't know how frequently, but we can track this hopefully pretty regularly. I think that's a great
Yes.
point.
Good point.
I wanted to make some comments. It deals a bit with this ordinance, and then we'll deal with the contract. Because I spoke up at the December meeting about some concerns about the contract, the things I didn't understand, and I was going to look into it. So I wanted to report back.
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? Are we going to go ahead and vote on this ordinance now?
Talk
or
into
wait?
the thing. You're not,
Are we going to vote on the ordinance?
no,
No.
we've got a motion and we have a second, and we're letting people make comments, and then I'm going to take comments from the audience.
Yeah.
All right, this is about the ordinance, right, not the contract.
Correct.
Well, okay, because I'm trying to tie the two things together just because I think it's important to understand how this process will work. First of all, the language, I spent some time with Greg, with one of Todd's associates, and with GATSO to clarify the language, and we had already made modifications, so I'm very comfortable with the language of the contract. Just as a sidebar, we included in the packet today under the contract, the supplemental agreement that should we choose as a village, if somebody doesn't pay their fine, we could employ GATSO to try to collect on that money over and above the normal process. And that probably is a good thing and probably something we'll want to do. To me, the biggest factor here in this way this works, and a concern was raised about, gosh, are we, a lot of the traffic presumably on Mayfield are residents or individuals from other communities going through the village on their way to or from 271. And, if we're just going to be sending out violations, we're going to create a lot of ill will. So I got a clearer understanding of how this process actually works. So if we set the definition of a notice of violation at 55 miles an hour, which is what the current ordinance would allow, and then we have the level of fines, I think there's one way to look at this. So First of all, that will generate a notice of, that will alert, GATSO will process that, any speed above 55. They will process the picture and that information and send that to our police department. Our police department then has to verify all of that as being legitimate, I guess, or, you know, that the picture and everything, a lot of that detail is spelled out. And then the police department then decides whether to issue a notice of violation. And they have 100% discretion. GATSO, in fact, is adamant that they have no say whatsoever. They are simply mechanically processing a violation above the speed limit. So a way to look at this is if an individual is going 65 miles an hour over, that's 20 miles over the speed limit. I'm not aware of any community that thinks that the police should be not be prosecuting or, trying to stop a speeder from going 20 miles over. We're not going to pursue people 10 miles over. That's what we just talked about. And our police chief, as far as the cameras, and our police chief or, his designee will have discretion. And that's going to be just like we operate today. When the policeman decides he's actually going to issue a ticket versus give a warning or whatever. In this case, I don't know how Greg and his team are going to handle it on a day-to-day. I think it's very possible or likely that in the early days, they're not going to be approving notices of violation for somebody going 56 miles an hour. I don't know that, but I think that's possible. Our goal here is not to issue as many tickets as we can, but rather to see if we're bringing the average speed down in the number of people violating. So I think that our police chief will use, as he does every day, use the right kind of discretion. And I don't really worry about the ill will with another community, because if somebody's going 20 miles an hour over, then I'm really not concerned if they get pretty irritated as us. So I do want to make one little comment that I'm going to make it a personal test, that if there is one individual that drives to and from every day and is going 20 miles an hour over every day and gets 20 notices of violation from us, I'd really like to meet that individual, because I'm not sure if I want him driving through our village every day. So hopefully people will start to adapt and will bring the speed down. So I'm not as concerned about creating ill will. I'm certainly concerned about, that we don't get tagged as being somebody just out for money. And I think that the way this program works, which I now understand, I think it could work very well and bring the speed down and achieve our goal. So.
Thank you. Any other comments?
A couple of points got to make.
David, you need to move the microphone.
Sorry, the date we had.
No, move it closer to you is the problem. Leave it, the button green and just, yeah.
Okay. The data we had for that famous day in October 2018.
You have to turn the church. I'm sorry, David. You'll get used to it.
Can I just speak to people the way I normally speak? Thank you.
It,
Because it's on the camera.
the recording, it doesn't pick it up if it isn't close to you. So,
Turn it on.
Here we
Turn
go.
it on.
How do I turn it? Just push the button.
Push
right?
the button.
That's what I just did.
There you go.
You're on if you're green.
Right, okay. On that famous day in October, 5,000 cars exceeded 65 miles an hour. That's a lot of tickets. More, I don't know how we're going to process all this, but that will be a lot of tickets, and that's at 65. So we're clearly aiming at the high end of this, and that makes perfect sense. But we've got to affect the people lower down the curve as well. And that's really what we have to do, because that's the bulk of the problem is below those fast speeds, because they're all causing the problem. So there was one other point I wanted to make. Yes, I do hope this ordinance is applied totally indiscriminately. I don't want to be sanctimonious. I don't think it matters a darn where the person lives. If they're speeding and they're doing it recklessly, they should be fined. I don't care if they're villagers or from Chesterland or from the Moon. I think we must be seen to be applying this in a totally non-discriminatory way, except speed.
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you. So I've received generous treatment in Gates Mills in the past. I don't expect that to continue.
Mayfield Road is very different.
No, any other road, any speed limit, I don't expect to be let off if I exceed the speed limit in a way that's we wouldn't want someone else from outside to do. So indiscriminate is very important to me. I'm not trying to be a Boy Scout or sanctimonious, but that's the way I feel about it. Maybe the ordinance should
I
say
think we
that.
all agree with you.
Maybe the ordinance should say that.
You know, and just a thought that from all the comments that we've been making, it's going to be real important to look at the data that's coming in, especially in the early months
Microphone.
when this gets started. See, I do the same thing and I've been around for a while. I might propose that the safety committee work with the chief to review that data and give us a summary report at each council meeting. I don't want to go in looking at that detail and see names and whatnot, but I would like the safety committee and the chief to be.
No, the numbers of what we had previous to this from the report that David's referring to, that's what the cameras will also do. And in talking to the Mayfield Village, he feels that 6 months you'll be able to look at it and kind of get a perception of where we are. So the safety committee should probably relook at that in 6 months after it's started. Any other comments? Mike?
One of our villagers who spoke from the floor made the point that there could be unintended consequences from a situation like this. And I'm satisfied that we're covered in the contract, but Chip, since you're talking about the contract, perhaps you could, what are the consequences if we wanted to get out of the contract?
Really, it's the way that this contract is, we would, depending on when we would want to back out, is that we would pay up to $107,000. It's $1,500 per month per camera for up to 36 months over the duration of this 5 years. So if we wanted to get out in one of the first 2 years, then we'd bear the full 36 months times $3,000. I guess that's $108,000. But if it's after the first 2 years, then that number declines by the number of months left. The only other is if the state laws make it illegal or whatever, but that's our fallback. To say that what I questioned in our last meeting was, if the police chief just decided not to issue any tickets, notice of violation for somebody going less than 100 miles an hour, so we obviously wouldn't ever issue one. That doesn't mesh with the spirit of this, and we'd probably lose that case if that were to be litigated. And we certainly aren't entering into this with any intent of doing anything along that line or anything other than trying to make this work for everybody. So again, the goal is to bring the speed down. And when you hear a number like David's about the number of speeders, hopefully we're not going to be issuing 5,000 notices of violation in day one. We're going to be managing this to see if the average speed keeps coming down and down, which is our goal.
May I just take up one point very quickly?
Green.
And then let go.
Okay, no,
Just bring it close.
I'm getting there.
You gotta talk,
20th century man.
David. David, I'm sorry, but you gotta put it, yeah. It just doesn't record. It doesn't pick up unless we have that close.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Now I've lost my train of thought completely.
Well, how about if I let,
No, here we go.
okay.
Here we go. I think change of law is force majeure under the contract, and we could cancel it without penalty. Good. The second point is, I can't imagine circumstances under which we would cancel the contract.
Right.
Well, can you? I mean, there's a provision in there to let us do so. I can't even imagine under what circumstances that would happen. Can anybody? I don't know. I mean,
I think it was just Michael's point that if the ill will is such that we're, becoming the Lindale of the east side, then, but I
Or
think-
you're diverting a lot of traffic into the village off of Mayfield.
so we allow people to speed again to prevent that?
Okay, I'd like to open it up. If anybody in the audience would like to make a comment, 2 minutes or less, please, and come up to the microphone and state your name and address.
Charlie Baker, property on both Mayfield and Echo Glen.
Got to get close to the microphone.
Question is,
Is that on? Could someone
one of,
look? Doesn't sound like it.
there's no switch or something.
Okay.
Okay. What do we do about class 6 and 8 trucks? Because the license plate is either missing on many, or it's only on the trailer behind it. We do have a significant issue on getting out onto Mayfield, and we're picking up more and more 4 through 8 class heavy duty trucks.
Chief, you want to take that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Baker, for the question. That's been asked, and it'll go to whatever the license plate is on the back of that vehicle.
So if he's hauling a trailer for somebody in California,
There'll be a transfer liability at that point, and it will be on them to go ahead and transfer that.
okay. So the question is then if they know that and whether or not it'll truly slow them down. Second question is this contract a public document at this point? Can it be read by anybody, or is it confined only to council?
It's a public document.
It's public.
Okay, so we could take a read it ourselves if I wanted to.
Yes, absolutely. And I was on that call when Greg and I asked about the semis, and 20 years ago, I had experience running a long haul trucking company. And I could tell you that the trailer on the back had no connection to the tractor in front. But today's world, they do apparently track that better. Yes, the owner of the trailer is not connected to the tractor, but they do know which trailer is with which tractor in most cases. At least that was Gatso's sense. It takes a little longer, but they feel that they could still get to the driver in a significant number of cases. That was my sense, Greg, that, yeah, they do pursue it and they do get to it eventually, but maybe not in all cases. So.
Okay. I've been trying to watch that, and there's probably 1 out of 100 trucks that you can read the license plate number. They're either covered with mud or they're not there. So
Well, that may be another.
it's going to be an issue that I think we'll have to enforce that with our own police rather than count on that. The other comment that I'd like to make is that it's the exceptionally fast car that seems to be a problem, and getting on and off Echo Glen and coming into it. It's that guy that scares the hell out of me. It isn't the car that's 10 miles an hour, or 5 miles an hour, or even a little bit more over the thing. But I see cars go by that have got to be doing 75 or more during rush hour. And so I think that's what we really want to catch and really want to put our foot down on, are the exceptionally fast cars can potentially create an accident. So that's my
Thank you.
comments. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Celeste McClung, 780 Chagrin River Road. This is a question. If someone is going 20 miles over the speed limit, our range is from 10 to 19 miles over, do they get charged for each mile over, or are they charged for 10 and whatever over?
Okay, so there's 3 tiers. So we've talked a lot about 10 to 19 being a $100 fine. 20 to 29 would be $200. Anything over 30 would be $300.
So it goes from the actual speed limit to whatever, there's a range from the
Correct.
actual speed limit to a
Correct.
certain.
So Mayfield Road's
tier.
45. Mayfield Road's 45. So if somebody was driving 65, 20 miles over, they would receive a $200 citation.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hi, Jerry.
Good evening, everybody. Jerry Bowman's Karen
Speak
Lane.
into it.
Jerry Bowman's Karen Lane. I'm pleased to have a really interesting discussion about this because this is a much more complex problem than one might think. Craig, Mrs. Steinberg, right off the bat hit the key thing. It's very difficult to drive down Mayfield Road on a hill on an 8% grade and maintain a low speed limit. 55 is probably for a good driver is probably the threshold. It would seem to me, this is my opinion, I could be wrong, that the target for safe driving on Mayfield Road is 50 to 60, maybe 57, 58 to 50, 51. I'd like the police department to, I mean, they're the experts, I'm not. But the other danger, which I think some of the comments that David has made, the other danger is when the traffic is heavy and you have drivers that drive slow, 45 miles an hour, and because of the publicity we're going to get, there are going to be people who are going to be driving 45 miles an hour. And if you combine that with rush hour traffic in the afternoon, people are trying to get home, and so they're going to try to push the top end of the speed situation without getting a ticket. It sounds like we're going to do a good job of promoting this, but it's also a danger. It's a safety risk when you have people driving at the low end of the speed limit or 45 miles an hour, and you have people driving at 55 or 60 that encourages lane swapping. I mean, we've all seen that in our experience. So I would just throw that out as my opinion, and I'd love some comment on it, particularly from the police department, you know, what they think is the absolute goal we're trying to get to in terms of average speed. Obviously, if somebody's going 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, that's crazy. It's going downhill and going that fast is absolutely.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
So we had a motion to approve the ordinance by Steinbrink and seconded by Turner. Aton? Yes. Allworder?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press? Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welsh?
Abstain.
Abstain or no?
No.
Ed, is there a reason that you're abstaining? This is a pretty
No, he did
important.
say no.
issue.
Yeah. I just feel there's too many open holes on this right now. It should be researched further before we make this kind of a step. You'll notice the audience is full of press right now. And there seems to be too many open issues. People I've talked to here in Gates Mills just don't feel that we, as a little horse community, should be, you know, stepping ahead in something like this. And I don't understand why the state's not doing it versus ourselves. I think the program itself is, you know, is got good potential, and I feel that, you know, it could save lives and everything like that. I'm not against that, but it's so arbitrary at this point. But I think we should research it further.
So was that an abstention or a no?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is resolution number 2021-37 as revised 1/11/22. Craig?
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Census Gatso Group for an automated photo traffic enforcement system and declaring an emergency.
Second.
Aton?
Well, we were kind of doing it together.
All my comments were oriented to the contract, but that's fine.
I've got one small question.
Go ahead, David.
I've got one small question. There's a difference between, in some cases, we pay $38 per ticket, or we pay to Gatso $38. In the other cases, we pay 38%. It says whichever will be the larger. When would 38% not exceed $38?
Okay, for
curious.
$100 fine,
Would they be the same?
It'd be the same.
they'd be the same.
So I guess it would be if we relaxed the fine and allowed someone to pay only $50 as opposed to 100. Then we'd expect to get $38 from that ticket.
Okay, they get 38 at a minimum.
Sorry, we pay $38.
Well, they get 38,
Yeah.
yeah. So if we negotiated something less.
Okay, so that's the way it would happen, is by negotiation.
Okay, so as I understand it, and I think our prosecutor commented on this, somebody could dispute the violation for ability to pay or something. And if that were negotiated, that they settled for less than $100, GATSO would still get 38 and we'd get the difference.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
That's fine.
that's all clarified. So I guess that could happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that addressed your question.
Another comment about the contract is I'm delighted that the underlying conflict between GATSO, who are in this for the money, and the village, who are in it for the safety, has not stopped us from having the flexibility to operate these cameras that we want. I commend whoever negotiated this contract in that regard, because that would have been an underlying conflict in any commercial negotiation that would have been very difficult to resolve, in my view, but it's been resolved in our favor, I believe. So I compliment whoever established this agreement. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move on now.
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes,
Welch.
No.
Okay, next is resolution number 2022-1. Chip?
This is a resolution authorizing the mayor and the clerk to enter into a lease agreement with Cynthia W. Halley, Inc. for space at 1501 Chagrin River Road. And I believe that I'm going to ask to suspend the rules and to declare an emergency. So, but let me talk about it first and then. Because as I understand this, so first of all, I will start by making a comment that, and I've talked to the mayor about this, and we're going to work on this, but I don't find it very agreeable to be handed a lease on Friday night, to have my name at the top of it, to be introduced as a council member, and to now be the person that had nothing to do with this. I'm not saying the people who did it didn't do a great job, but I am just presenting this. So as I understand the situation, this was a very slow process. The tenant took quite a while, perhaps related to COVID, the uncertainty. We all know that the Cindy Halley, the store, is a wonderful attribute in our village. And presumably over the last year and a half with COVID, it was a little touch and go. I don't know, but it took quite a while to bring it into focus. At the same time, as you may be aware, this space that this lease will be for is the space that Howard Hanna has been occupying. They have moved out of that space into a smaller space on the second floor, which opened up this space, which as that became final, and I don't know, that was only 2 or 3 months ago that really finalized the situation. August, Howard Hanna, that Cindy felt that would be great additional space. She has wanted additional space. So that kind of opened that up. So by the time everything was worked through, it's now, early January. Technically, her current lease expired on December 31st. By the way, I assume we're just continuing. She's sort of continuing on a month-to-month basis until the new space is. I don't know if there's a natural extension to that current lease, but so she wants to get started on rehabbing or retrofitting the new space so that she can move in by the early July. Interestingly, I think there's going to be some interest in the space that she's going to free up. So the sooner we can get this going, then I think we can be that much sooner filling in the space that she's currently in. Obviously, a lot of room between, or a lot of work between now and that point. So this is for a 5-year term with a renewal. She had the right to renew it for another 5 years at a 10% escalator. Not sure about 10%. That, you know, could be a pretty good deal 5 years from now, depending on what inflation turns out to be. But so at this point, I'm just introducing this, and I guess the first I'm making a move to suspend the rules.
Todd wants to add something.
Yes.
Yes, I
Pull it
apologize.
close to you, Todd.
I apologize, Council Member Hotwater. I got this last week, reviewed it quickly. I made some revisions to it. Not anything that was really substantive, but important revisions, I felt. I saw that the commencement date of this lease is July 1st. So I did not put an emergency clause in the legislation authorizing it for that purpose. Because of that reason, I should say.
But she doesn't have a lease,
So-
but we're starting the work in the new space and she's still in the old space. So
So I don't know.
That's the answer.
I think we need to
Oh,
cover.
no, I
ourselves.
understand that. That's the answer, but that's the new news that I got today as I was asking this. So the question is, do we need to suspend the rules and do we need to declare an emergency? Because my first instinct was, well, this is in July, so we can read this 2 or 3 times. But what does that do to, who knows, the work that's underway? Is this going to slow it down if we don't approve it tonight?
And she's still functioning in the current place.
It's up to the village what you'd want to let her do in terms of renovations to the new space.
I think from a insurance and everything else standpoint, we should go forward with it. No.
There really should be further discussion
Yeah.
this time, and the post and the USPS lease as well. Procedurally, I'm saying. Didn't say this until Friday. That's not.
And we've already started work over there in the new section, I'm saying. So that she can get open.
Yeah, I'll second Chip's.
I do too.
This, it's kind of challenging because we all, would want to support, the expansion of Cindy Halley and, discussions that might not look like they support that because we want to look more closely at the contract. I wouldn't want to get back to her to say, there's some question on the part of the council. But on the other hand, we really haven't had a chance to take a good look at this. And I have some questions about the contract myself and would appreciate someone from the real estate committee commenting on it.
We can put it on first reading. I mean,
I agree with one of Chip's comments. I don't think any of us around this table are smart enough to know what the fair rent will be for the second term. I don't have a disagreement in principle with having a second term, but maybe it ought to be related to an inflation index or something like real estate inflation index.
To support your point, Michael, that would be my instinct. I've certainly done contracts with, what the CPI has been or a percentage of CPI, because that may or may not be a good thing. But what I don't know, and to David's point, I don't know all the details of the negotiations. Perhaps that was tried and for whatever set of reason. So I think we can get some clarity then. Maybe
Yeah, sure.
Put this on first reading and bring it up again and maybe get at least Warren here or somebody.
yeah, we can have Warren come to the next meeting.
And maybe some questions, again, has to do with the square foot, the cost per square foot. How does that compare to other retail in the area? I had a question about the tenant improvements. Again, to what extent is it common to have the first year of rent go towards improvements? And who approves those improvements? It says here that receipts are returned to the village and they're paid, but I'd be more interested in somebody reviewing
Right.
the
Well, in this
bills
case,
before
Dave
they submit
will
are
be the one that
submitted.
reviews it. But we can have it first reading and have Warren come.
I think that'd be good.
And I'd like the minutes to make sure they show that we're certainly very, enthusiastic and want to see this happen. We just want to understand it a little more and maybe there would be some refinement, but
Could I just make two observations that you might ask Warren to answer when he does come and talk to us a second time? First is that giving someone a unilateral option, as we're giving to this tenant, to extend a lease at a fixed price is a very valuable thing we're giving that person. If it's too expensive, they won't take the option. If it's cheap, they will. So we're taking the risk, and they've got a nice asset there in terms of the option. The other thing I was thinking about on the Halley lease as well is that I agree entirely that we shouldn't be reading this just once. It's premature, and there's time, in my view. And we can give assurances to her that the first 5 years are okay, I think, without voting necessarily, but we can give her an indication that council supports the first 5 year. I would not vote for a 5-year option with a fixed price.
Without a fixed price?
No, with a fixed price. I would not.
Okay.
I would.
So you
prefer
want to
go
base it
Microsoft
on?
on an index of some sort.
Okay.
Well, I will tell you, this is very common language in lease. We just renegotiated our lease 5 months ago in our office building, and this is almost like boilerplate language in terms of CPI might have been used back in the 80s when inflation was higher, but today, if a tenant has a right to extend, that's obviously a benefit for the tenant. And that's typically spelled out ahead of time. It's not, hey, well, let's see where the lease environment is in 5 years, and then we'll decide whether we want to extend. You're right, it does benefit the tenant, but it's almost always spelled out in advance. But I think Warren should be here to explain all this.
And one other concern I have about the village making 10-year real estate commitments, we're about to conduct a comprehensive plan. And use of real estate in the village, both land and property, is going to be a key part of that conversation. This is a very small deal, but in principle, I don't think the council should be making 10-year commitments that may in some way restrict the degrees of freedom we have in the comprehensive planning process. So that's another reason I would not vote for the second 5 years.
Question. What's the current status of the space? Is Howard Hanna, is that lease expired? The space that Cindy Halley's moving into?
yes, that is now vacant at
So
this
it's
moment.
vacant, no lease on it, and not earning any rental income?
Correct.
Craig, just out of curiosity, when you had the renewal, was it 10%?
No, it was lower than that.
Lower than that,
Yeah.
okay.
Wasn't there some discussion at the real estate committee of?
Speak into the microphone, please, Mike.
Wasn't there some discussion back in August at the real estate committee about trying to attract another outfit in that would be open for lunch? Since Sarah's is no longer open for lunch? And weren't we looking at the Howard Hanna space in that regard?
Yeah, just for clarity purpose, I'm not on the real estate committee. This is just from personal experience and, 15, 20 years of, running a business and negotiating leases as they come up. I'm not on the real estate committee.
Mike, you're correct. The problem was when that building was put in place, they didn't put in any kind of, well, I guess I'd call it infrastructure. And to put the kind of operation into that space for food would have required, I don't know the extent, but it was a couple $100,000, and the tenant wasn't willing to commit to that, and we weren't going to get a very good return. This actually changes that picture a bit, because obviously a retail store doesn't need that same kind of infrastructure. And now the space that opens up might be a little easier to make. And I can just tell you, it may come to nothing, but there are some people that are in fact interested in at least looking at that potentially. And who knows between that and, whether anything comes from it. So it's a potentially higher probability that may move from 0 to 1%, but it's a higher probability that maybe that space might have something that might represent something, food or something. So
It's the plumbing and the drainage that is the problem. And moving into the Howard Hanna area would have been like 200, I think the price was $250,000 plus. And it was cost prohibitive for the size of the space that's involved. So they backed off, and then Cindy became interested. But that's not to preclude, like Chip says, the place Cindy's moving out of is closer to all the pipes that are needed.
Do we need a?
I guess the other question about the contract too is the cost to the village for renovating the space for Cindy Halley.
That's pretty typical. When you own a building, you have to put in to get out of it.
Right, but what?
Pardon me?
I'd just like to see the amount. When we hear from the real estate committee.
Yeah, I think whether the dollar amount you're referencing is a fair value exchange between both parties.
Right. Okay,
We need
anything
we need
else
a
on that?
second to put that on first reading, or do we already?
No, you don't.
First
you-
reading.
There's no vote on a
I'll
first reading.
withdraw my second.
I withdraw my motion, so.
Okay, next is ordinance 2022-2, Chip.
Okay, so this is a follow-on to the December where we approved the general fund. This is the other funds, the appropriation amounts. So this is an ordinance to amend the annual appropriation ordinance number 2021-50 to increase certain appropriations and other expenditures of the Village of Gates Mills, Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022. I believe we need to suspend the rules and declare an emergency on this one because this is, we can't spend any money without doing this, so. Okay. So I will move in a second to suspend the rules. I just want to make a couple of points. Steve certainly elaborated on the financial picture out of 2021. With this appropriation dropped in, I did some calculations and I just want to make a couple of comments about our supplement our financial position based on top of what Steve said. If you add up these appropriations with the forecast for the other revenue that comes into these funds, coupled with the general fund, our combined all funds cash picture for 2022 would decline if every number came true by $24,000, which is about as close to break even as you could come up with. So obviously good news in that sense. Now, one of the factors in here in all of our numbers is that we've gotten this money from the government in 2021. We didn't spend any of it yet, as Steve alluded to, and we're going to get more in 2022. So some of our cash surplus is related to the fact that we haven't spent that money. And once we do, then that'll be an offset, obviously. On the other hand, if you looked at 2021, our net cash increase for the year was $2,337,000. We got a one-time unusual payment of $2.1 million, but that still meant that the rest of our operation, all funds in, was positive by $237,000. This, if we hit every number in 2022, it would be a $24,000 deficit, which would mean over the 2 years, $212,000 or $213,000 net surplus over this 2-year period. So the 2022 budgets do include catching up on that vehicle that we weren't able to get in 2021. Again, we've got a lot of ins and outs, but the point is, at least in the very short term, that the kind of $600,000 number that the long range plan pointed out, at least in this very near term, we're not seeing that. I know David, you and I and Steve and many want to look at the update to the long range, and I'm sure that it's still going to represent some some challenges, maybe of consequence, but at the moment, at least, we enter into it with quite a cash surplus and see what that picture is. So I move to suspend the rules on ordinance 2022-2.
Second.
Thank you, Sandra. Eton? Yes. Allworder?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press?
Yes, but I'd like to know what the Purcell Fund is, since I'm new.
That's for the beautification of the downtown or the village of the downtown area of Gates Mills.
Fine.
Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welch?
Yes.
And now I'd like to move to approve ordinance number 2022-2.
Second.
Eton? Yes. Allworder?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welch?
Yes.
Next is resolution 2022-3. Chip.
So this resolution is just effectively the second step of what we just approved, which is the specific steps of moving the funds from general fund over to the specific special funds. So again, this is just an appropriation, so I do need to suspend the rules, but do not need to declare an emergency. I learn this every time I have a meeting. So a resolution authorizing and directing the transfer of certain sums from the general fund to the capital improvement fund, mayor's fund, wastewater fund, and police pension fund. And I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Eton?
Yes.
Are these actual funds transfer or are these accounting?
Oh, oh boy, Steve, you might have to answer that.
There are only a few bank accounts. For example, the Land Conservancy is a separate bank account. Most of these are, I'll say, a central bank account, and the funds are maintained within those accounts.
Correct.
That's correct.
In most cases.
That's correct. That's correct.
You know what? I actually thought we had separate checking accounts for each of these, but it's a one account. And so, yeah, so we don't.
Eton?
Yes.
Allworder?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welch?
Yes.
And I now move to approve resolution 2022-3.
Do we have a second?
Need a second?
Second.
Eton? Yes. Allworder?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welch?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is resolution 2022-4.
This is having a wonderful evening here. So here we go again. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor and the clerk to enter into a lease agreement with the United States Postal Service for space at 1500 Chagrin River Road. Now, while this doesn't take effect till March 2nd, they wanted a 6-month window, as you said in your note. Thank you, Todd, for providing that. So do I need to suspend the rules? Do I need to declare an emergency?
Yes, I would suggest that that be done.
So I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Eton?
Comment, can I make, is this the time for comment?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think it
I
is,
think
yeah.
this process is atrocious. I mean, this lease has been in place for 5 years. Sorry.
Green club.
I think this is atrocious. The lease has been in place for 5 years. We knew it would come up for renewal when it came up for renewal. I mean, it's like a glacier coming. I knew nothing, and nor did anyone else in council know about this 6-month requirement to have the deal done before the commencement of the lease. I wonder if the real estate committee knew that. That window is already, we've broken that. I mean, that we're way through that. So I'm very, very uncomfortable supporting proposals of this kind that come with no notice whatsoever and no warning of any kind. So I'm dead against suspending the rules. I don't think the post office will walk away from this deal if we can't sign it until we've done a second reading. So I think that's up for the real estate people to decide. But I can't see the post office moving out if we don't approve it tonight.
I'll give you some history with this since I objected to it too, from the standpoint this has been going on much longer than what this even alludes to. In the fall of, I think it was in the summer of 20, we started on this lease. The first thing that happened, that we got a letter from the post office, and in the letter, they said that we would be using they appointed a real estate firm that was actually out of Colorado, and that we would pay them $13,000 to negotiate the lease with us. That's on top of what we would get out of the lease, which was just under $60,000 a year for the post office. Well, I was very aggravated with it, and I contacted Dave Joyce's office. This is in the fall of over a year ago. And they looked into it and they discovered that they couldn't do anything because the Postal Service is a separate sacred group. So that came back. I turned it over to Warren, and a gentleman that he was working with was, over a period of time, it went on, arguing about the $13,000 to negotiate the contract. As it ended up, he couldn't get anywhere with it. It was $13,000 and pretty much the same contract that they requested. So then I said, okay, and I gave it to Todd, and Todd got back to me, and I think we're going back to September, if I'm not mistaken. He said, let me have a stab at it. Well, between the time that Warren no longer was in communication with the real estate firm in Colorado, the guy that he worked with, they got rid of. And we have a new guy that didn't take hold right away and get back to Todd for a period of time. So then Todd took it over, and he was able to negotiate with this new gentleman who is workable and was quite nice to work with, half the fee. Todd, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I really got this thing in August. I spoke with Warren.
August of last year.
Of 2020.
Correct.
2021.
21.
Last year. And so we went through it in detail, and he said, I couldn't get anywhere on these particular provisions of the lease. And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. And the broker at that point was not responsive. It was turned over to another broker. Again, there was no response. And then we got a third person who was very responsive. And I was able to work through some of these provisions to get them changed. The biggest one was an environmental indemnification and hold harmless that we were supposed to give to the post office or the US Postal Service. Legally in Ohio, a municipal corporation cannot indemnify and hold another party harmless in a contract. And it took me months to convince the Postal Service that that was the case. I actually gave them a legal opinion on it. And so it was just the end of last week where they finally acquiesced. And I think part of it is that they're desperate to get this thing done now and not wait till the last minute in March to put this in place. So I think that was helpful, at least in that aspect of it. So this last broker was quite good to work with. We got some other smaller changes in terms of no holdover tenancy after the 5 years, those types of things. So I did make some progress, not as much as I wanted. I like to analogize this to wrestling with a 600-pound gorilla when you're taking on the federal government, and particularly the United States Postal Service. So that's why we're where we're at this time. And as you saw, it's about a 10% increase in the rent from where we were at before.
That's why the length of time was eaten up.
Yeah, but if this 6-month requirement was there, we knew that a year ago. I mean, this is atrocious. I mean, this would not be acceptable.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay, so I'm not going to vote for suspending the rules.
Okay.
Todd, you were close to this. Can you give us, again, without Warren here, but it sounds like you're the closest. What do you think the implications are? Our February council meeting is, I don't know the exact date, but but the 11th of February.
Oh, sorry.
I got an email this morning from the broker saying that please absolutely convince council to authorize this evening. So
Well, he would say that. wouldn't he?
Postal Service was asking the broker to make sure that gets done. And I got an email last week, 3 or 4 of them, from not only the broker, but the Postal Service about trying to get this done.
Which is interesting because it kept us waiting for months for a reply.
Yeah, exactly. So what's your sense, Todd, of waiting a month? Are we going to get anything
We're not
more?
gonna get anything more, no.
We don't want any more. We just want the time. So people can talk about it and listen and ask proper questions. That's why we have 3 readings.
No, that's partially. The 3 readings are strictly a government imposed thing. No business would make decisions and park them for 3 months.
But that's why we do it, because government says we have to. Unless we waive it.
Right.
Well, it's true a business wouldn't, but businesses don't have to talk to their voters. And it is good to give the voters a chance to comment.
Absolutely.
Bring it closer to talk into it. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, what's the risk of delaying? I mean, is there any possibility that they would walk away? We wouldn't have a post office here?
I don't know. Maybe that's a possibility. I'll tell everybody, my father was a postmaster for 30 years. And all the little towns around our little town lost their post office. Now, do I know whether you'll lose your post office? I really don't.
The history of that post office has been, since Mayor Marston, we had to make it a substation like they did at the bottom of May Company to even save it. They want to pull it out of here. They want to move it to Chesterland. We're going to lose our zip code. We have fought with this, trying to save this post office now for, I think Karen and I know my 22 years now. They don't want us. They cost them money, and they would do anything just to pull out of here. We lose our zip code. We lose our post office. We had to build that building, and we had to expand it at our expense just to save it. I think to rattle their chain at this point would be disastrous.
I guess I would say under general circumstances, it is better to have, the three readings and give people an opportunity. I'm not crazy about emergency and suspend the rules either, but the whole history that the mayor has gone through with the post office, and I know she's talked about it often, and with Todd's comments, I'm concerned that delaying it isn't going to get us anything more, and may risk our position. What if this broker leaves and it goes past March?
To my knowledge, they're still losing money, so they might downsize.
Yeah. Well, our volume here in this post office is very low. We've gone out over the years. I know Eaton Corporation and I think even Deacons and Physicians Ambulance, everything. We've asked them all to move their business mail through that post office just to get the volumes up. And I mean, they came after us last year because our stamp volume wasn't high enough and almost shut us down. So it's just, as Todd says, they could say goodbye, and there's just really, we have to start all over again.
It's late because they haven't cooperated. Should go back. I would intend to go back and say we need another month. The council members comfortable doing this. The villagers,
I would just add a few comments, Todd. great job on shepherding this along the way. I think the position of the post office and not being very responsive to getting this taken care of from day one tells us a lot of what we need to know. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that's lived in the village for more than a few years that the post office has tried on more than one occasion to take the post office away. And I agree with some of the comments that have been made, particularly that under normal circumstances, if we're dealing with the private business, that's certainly one thing. But when you're dealing with the federal government, that's certainly something else. And I don't think the little village of Gates Mills is in any position to be dictating terms to the federal government. So I look at this and say that the post office is an asset to the village. My assumption is that those in the real estate committee know what they're doing. They're experts in their field. They would not have negotiated a lease in bad faith, whether that's terms or rental rate for the village. And so I look at this and while I agree that it's less than ideal and wish circumstances were different, I'm in favor of moving forward with this.
And I'd have to say that Todd did most all of this lease.
I view this second, what you said, Craig. It's unfortunate circumstance. I don't like it. Yes, I've been on council and I appreciate the new council members suddenly being forced to this. On the other hand, we're all residents. We all know our post office. We all know that I think we'd like to keep it certainly for at least this next 5-year term. I rather get to the root cause of this, which is, quite frankly, I have been on council, and while I was a bit aware of this going on, the net result is a lot of council members that aren't with us weren't aware that this was going to hit us. If they had been here at this time, they wouldn't have been aware and would have been caught, from Friday night realizing we had to approve it. And I talked with the mayor today, and I'd like to formally request that starting in the new year, now we're already in the new year, so maybe in February, we get a list of all of our leases and when they come due and what's going to come due in the next 12 months so that at least we're aware of it. And that then we get briefed by the real estate committee on how those discussions and negotiations are going. It's one thing to have received this and never been alerted to it, but we could have learned 6 months ago that this was underway. We could have learned 5 months ago that there's some issues. We could have learned 4 months ago that this is what's agreed to, but these are the issues. So we could have been apprised so that by the time it came to this, it wasn't out of the blue with only 2 days notice. Not saying that might have worked in this case, but in the future, just because we've had 2 leases tonight that have been dropped in our lap. And I think that we need a process as a council to have a little more advance warning. I don't think the mayor's going to fight this. I think it's a
That's good. I think it's a good idea. We can't, I think we should have the leases a month. They could be in the packets, but they could be in the packets for the month before we're going to vote on them, Todd.
If not even, yeah. So, and that just has to be a condition in all these negotiations. Guys, if we don't get this done by now, it ain't going to get approved for at least a minimum of another hearing.
I support that entirely. Well said.
So
can you speak into the microphone? Sorry.
We're going to have a separate lesson on using microphones here. Part
of the new.
All good, all good.
2 years.
So I think at the moment, there's a motion on the table to suspend the rules for resolution 2022-4. Second.
And you seconded, and Mr. Yatan, we heard you loud and clear. No. All order.
Well, he can vote for the suspension.
Oh, okay.
I'm happy we've identified a serious problem that will be corrected in the process.
Okay, thank you. All order?
Yes.
Deacon?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welsh?
Yes. And now I move to approve resolution 2022-4.
Second.
Aton?
Yes.
All order.
Yes.
Deacon? Press? Steinbrink?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Welsh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Business from the audience, any questions or thoughts? Come up to the microphone, state your name, please. We'll talk.
Hi, my name's Jim Long. I've live at 2017 Som. I've lived in Gates Mills 24 years, and I'm not here to complain. I love living here. I've called the police department. They're wonderful. I called Dave Biggert. He took care of my problem. I even called the fire department to have him paint my fire hydrant. Everything's wonderful here. I really enjoy living here. But I have 3 ideas that maybe you could give me answers going forward. I went to the, this is my first time I've been at the City Hall here. I went to the candidates night and they talked about all this money going to the Mayfield Heights City Schools. Has Gates Mills ever asked for an audit, a complete audit where our money's going, and show us where this, is it $11 million, I guess, is going every year? Has anyone from Gates Mills asked for an audit on that $11 million from the school board? These 2 other ideas, I was at the Plain Dealer for 25 years and I was in the management side. And these 2 ideas come from what the Plain Dealer did. One day back in the 80s, a taxi cab pulled up in front of the Plain Dealer and 7 people got out. They were auditors from New York and they audited the whole Plain Dealer building, the waste baskets, everything they audited. Do we have that process here where an outside auditor could come in to the city of Gates Mills and audit?
I can answer that question. Yes, we do. And you'll notice on the furniture and different things, pictures, there's numbers and whatnot. We do have a full audit for everything that the village has, the vehicles, trucks, parts, tools.
Okay.
I guess they're not toys, tools.
Like I counted 49 chairs in this room. In 2 years, will there be 49 chairs here or will there be 39?
They're counted.
All right, the second idea, back in the 80s, and with the accounting department, the payroll department, instead of direct deposit, the Plain Dealer asked all the employees to come downstairs and pick up their paycheck and show an ID. And there was a small pile of paychecks left over. Has the Gates Mills ever asked, instead of direct deposit, ask all the employees to pick up their physical paycheck for 1 week and see if any paychecks are left over?
I can see why the Plain Dealer would do that. We're so small. We know and see everyone that is getting a check.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you'll come. Like I said, you should participate in
First time in
our
24 years, maybe I'll.
comprehensive plan. He's willing. Sandra, Chip.
Yeah, just a comment about the audit. I'm not aware that the village itself has ever asked for an audit of the school district, but their budget comes from the state
Well, I'm looking to
and
see
local.
if they're
and
using our
it's-
money to pave a street in Mayfield Heights rather than go to the school.
I think it's a good idea. I can't answer that. I know that we've ever requested an audit, and I'm certain that we certainly can.
Well, I think the state, we can look into it, but I would guess the state audits their budget and their use of their funds. They do make a report to us every year. And we're going to be talking with them about making that report again this year. And
Yeah,
we have
we'll-
had some meetings
we'll,
with them over at the school board as well, but point taken. I'll check into it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I'd just like to welcome the new council members. I thought this was a wonderful meeting, very robust. I personally love the questions. You've got me thinking about things or did before. So just great start. to our
Very
new
good.
council.
Thank you all. Need a motion.
And I move to end the meeting.
Adjourn.
Adjourn. I moved to adjourn.
We have a second?
Second.
Anton,
Yes, certainly.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Welch.
Yes.